walking on water, turning water into wine, raising the dead. For 2,000 years, the miracles of Jesus have inspired faith for billions and skepticism for many others. But what do scientists and historians actually say when they examine these accounts? The answers might surprise you. Let's dive in. First, let's be clear about what we're asking. When historians study biblical miracles, they're not asking whether miracles are possible. They're asking, what can we know about these stories as historical documents? What was the context? How were they recorded? And what do they tell us about the world of first century Palestine? Here's something fascinating. Virtually all serious historians agree that Jesus was a real person who lived in Judea around 30 AD. They agree he was known as a healer and teacher. And here's the kicker. Even skeptical historians acknowledge that Jesus' contemporaries genuinely believed he performed extraordinary acts. The Gospels weren't written in a vacuum. They were circulated among people who could have disputed the claims if they were completely fabricated. But let's talk about specific miracles and what scholars say. Take the healings. Jesus reportedly healed the blind, the paralyzed, people with skin diseases. From a historical perspective, scholars note that many conditions in the ancient world were psychosomatic or stress-related. Modern medicine recognizes that psychological factors can cause real physical symptoms, and psychological interventions can sometimes provide dramatic relief. Some researchers point to placebo effects, which we now know can be incredibly powerful, sometimes producing measurable physiological changes. Does this explain all the healing accounts? Not necessarily. But it shows that dismissing these stories entirely might be as unscientific as accepting them uncritically. Now let's talk about the big ones. Feeding 5,000 people with 5 loaves and 2 fish? From a naturalistic perspective, some scholars have suggested this was about sharing. That Jesus' example inspired others in the crowd to share their own food. Others point out that ancient audiences understood symbolic storytelling differently than we do. The multiplication of food echoes stories of the prophet Elisha and would have signaled to Jewish audiences that a new prophet had arrived. But here's where it gets interesting. The gospel writers present this as a literal, physical miracle witnessed by thousands. If it were purely symbolic, why include such specific details about the location, the number of people, the 12 baskets of leftovers? Walking on water is another fascinating case. Geologists have studied the Sea of Galilee and discovered that rare ice formations can occur under specific weather conditions. Other scholars find this explanation more far-fetched than the miracle itself, given the climate of the region. Then there's the resurrection, the cornerstone miracle of Christianity. Here's what we can say historically. Something happened that transformed Jesus' terrified, scattered followers into people willing to die claiming they'd seen him alive. The tomb was apparently empty. Even hostile sources don't dispute this. Multiple accounts describe appearances to individuals and groups. Naturalistic explanations have been proposed for centuries. The swoon theory suggests Jesus didn't actually die on the cross. But Roman executioners were professionals. They knew how to kill people. Medical experts who've studied crucifixion find survival virtually impossible. The hallucination theory suggests the disciples experienced grief-induced visions. But hallucinations are typically individual experiences, and the accounts describe group encounters, physical interactions, even eating with the risen Jesus. Some scholars argue the disciples stole the body and invented the story. But would they die for something they knew was a lie? People die for beliefs they think are true all the time, but rarely for deliberate fabrications. Here's what's crucial to understand. Science operates within natural laws. By definition, a miracle would be an exception to those laws. So when scientists approach miracle claims, they're often talking past the question. Science can tell us what normally happens, it can't definitively tell us what can never happen. Modern physics has shown us that reality is stranger than we thought. Quantum mechanics reveals particles that exist in multiple states simultaneously. We've discovered that time isn't absolute. The universe itself apparently emerged from nothing in the Big Bang. None of this proves miracles happen, but it does show that our materialist assumptions about what's possible have been repeatedly overturned. Meanwhile, historians remind us that miracle claims were controversial even in Jesus' time. The Gospels record people accusing him of using demonic power or being a charlatan. If miracles were easily accepted or expected in that culture, why the fierce debate? So where does this leave us? After 2,000 years of investigation, the miracle accounts resist simple explanations. Skeptical scholars can't fully explain them away. Believing scholars can't prove them scientifically. What we're left with is a choice about how we interpret the evidence. What we can say is this: something extraordinary happened in first century Palestine that changed the course of human history. Whether you see that as divine intervention or remarkable human events, the impact is undeniable.